We're in studio with Republican candidate for governor of Pennsylvania, Bob Guzzardi. Welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to have you here, sir. Okay, a little bit of background first about you.
Well, I'm from Ardmore, Pennsylvania. I'm a businessman. I've never held any political office. I don't have any real official involvement with the Republican Party. I don't receive any money from the government. I don't get any tax credits, no subsidies. I am the forgotten taxpayer. My background is I've been in business. We're still in business. I have two brothers. We have an apartment house in Center City, Philadelphia. We used to own a lot more real estate in Center City, Philadelphia, but we've sold them over time, and so I'm have some free time, and I wanted to focus on what I thought were some of the problems that I've encountered in business. And about a year ago, we sold I was in a partnership in a gym in Center City, Philadelphia, the 12th Street Gym.
Mm-hmm.
We sold the gym, and sort of based on those experiences, and because I have more time, I now involved in this, particularly given Tom Corbett's pathetic polling numbers. It seemed an opportune time to run and to make the case and give Republicans an alternative to Tom Corbett and the status quo.
Okay, before we talk a little bit more about that, what do you think, and you already addressed some of this, you're unique in that you don't have any political background, but what do you think makes you qualified for the job?
Well, the fact that I've been in business, that I have followed these issues for many, many years, in part because I am not part of the establishment or part of the Republican or the Democratic Party. I bring the view of the forgotten taxpayer. I've been in business. We've run businesses. There are certain issues that, of course, are unique to government. But look, Ed Rendell did it for 8 years. If he did it, how hard can it be? Tom Corbett's done it for 3 years. How hard can it be?
Obviously, and now let's get into that next part of it. This is kind of unique because usually when you have a election coming up and you have the incumbent, and then you have the other party has their big primary, and I think the Democrats have, I believe, 5 or 6 people running. That are going to, running in May, and whoever wins, of course, then goes on in November. You're kind of unique because you're going against the standing incumbent. Why are you doing this?
The main reason is when you take a look at Tom Corbett's polling numbers, you see that he has not he's a November loser. The polling showed that he's a November loser. He has not, no poll shows him beating any Democrat in November. No poll, not one. There was an election about a year ago, Kane versus Freed, in which Tom Corbett's handpicked hack named Dave Freed ran 94,000 fewer voters than Diana Irie Vaughn, who was the treasurer. That told me that Republicans had recognized that Sandusky was an issue and that Tom Corbett's man, Dave Freed, was unacceptable to them. But given that race plus a year of polling showing Tom Corbett can't win in November, it seemed that it would be reasonable to challenge Tom Corbett, and particularly given that he has broken both of his promises, or broken his promises twice, not to raise taxes, not to raise fees. The low polling numbers, the broken promises, the fact that I think that Republicans who voted for Tom Corbett in 2010 won't vote for him again. Tom Corbett broke his promises to those who voted for him in 2010 and betrayed their vote. I don't think they're going to vote for him again. I think you're going to see the same dynamic that you saw with Rick Santorum, where he received 797,000 fewer votes in 2006 than he did in 2000. I think you're going to see Tom Corbett with a huge drop-off. The first indication is the Kane versus Freed race, and the second is the polling. And then the fact that he raised this gas tax, $2.4 billion. Well, who's going to pay that $2.4 billion? The forgotten taxpayer who seems never to be calculated to any of these decisions, raising taxes, targeting Marcellus Shale. Marcellus Shale is targeted as a business. It means no business in Pennsylvania is safe from the government. The power to tax is the power to destroy. So the government and the politicians pick their targets, and if you don't want to lose your business, you have to lobby and pay campaign fees and do all those things that big business does. Meanwhile, there's a forgotten taxpayer out there that doesn't have that kind of ability and is paying for all the costs of government. A government is paid for by the forgotten taxpayer. It's time the forgotten taxpayer had somebody in the governor's office who was willing to say no. We're not going to increase the budget in nominal terms from one year to another, as has happened in the last 3 years. I think Tom Corbett's first budget was the first budget in maybe 20 years where the nominal where the spending did not increase over year to year. If I'm a governor, my policy is no. We're not going to increase spending. You have to reduce spending in order to reduce taxes. But most important, we have a fiscal iceberg ahead of us. It's a huge iceberg. It is something that is going to affect every taxpayer in Pennsylvania, every resident in Pennsylvania. It's the fiscal iceberg, partially and most notably driven by the pensions, but the fact that for the last 6 years we have been spending more money. The expenditures have exceeded revenue in the last 6 years. That means 3 of Tom Corbett's years, expenditures exceeded revenues. The Commonwealth Foundation has done some excellent work on budgeting and on analysis of Tom Corbett's budget, Ed Rendell's budget, the spending in Pennsylvania, the debt in Pennsylvania. The General Assembly, the Republican General Assembly, over the last 3 years has voted to increase debt by $6.3 billion. Now, debt did not increase by that amount, but they voted to increase that amount. And if they voted to increase debt, it seems to me that they plan to increase debt. It's, why would you take out a credit card if you're not going to use a credit card? So you're seeing votes to increase debt. You see spending increased every year. You see the pension bomb not being addressed. There is also a retiree health care benefit of another $17 billion that has been ignored. With all these coming due, this fiscal iceberg has all the taxpayers on board. We have a Titanic filled with taxpayers, and the question is, will the taxpayers do anything about it? So I am running a very, very unconventional campaign. I don't intend to spend any significant money, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 of my own money, and I hope that the campaign and the message of the fiscal iceberg, the 3-card Monte game that they're playing in Harrisburg, where they pretend to care about the taxpayer and care to pass bills that improve roads and tax Marcellus Shale and get money for the counties and all of that, a 3-card Monte game, and there's a forgotten taxpayer that's paying for all of this. And that forgotten taxpayer is you, and that is the Guzzardi voter. And if I connect with those voters, I think that at least we will send, at the very least, we'll send a message to Tom Corbett. But I think it's a likelihood that Tom Corbett's numbers are so bad and the disaffection in the Republican Party is so high that he will lose the nomination. At that point, you have now come to the position of reforming the Republican Party in Pennsylvania. Reforming the Republican Party in Pennsylvania is the only way to reform Pennsylvania, to bring it on to some fiscal stability where you have low taxes and makes Pennsylvania a place to grow businesses and to grow old. We have a population that is growing older and older on fixed income, and yet the cost of government keeps going up and up, and it's hitting those people on fixed income, and it's making Pennsylvania a very unpleasant place to grow old. Now, perhaps in a college radio station that may not be something that sells, but let me turn it around and say someday you all will get out of college, we hope, and you'll be looking for a job. Well, when the government is the venture capitalist, the chief venture capitalist in the state, I think you might have a difficulty finding a job. That's why one of the reasons Pennsylvania is the oldest state is because its younger people leave. Florida is an older state because older people like to go there because there's no estate tax. Pennsylvania is the oldest state because the young people are leaving. That tells you a lot about the political and the economic climate in Pennsylvania, and that has to change.
So, you've talked a lot about, tax reform and the budget problems in the state. What are some of your other big platforms that, like education? Obviously, this is a college radio station, so give me some of your thoughts on education and some of the other big things that are important to you.
Well, I talk a lot about the fiscal iceberg as being the most important issue that will impact taxpayers. One of the ways to reduce taxes is to reduce spending. And in order to do that, for example, in education, which is controlled, the government K through 12 is controlled by unions. One of the things that I would like to see happen is paycheck protection, where union workers are not forced to pay, or government workers are not forced to join unions, and government workers are not forced to have dues taken out of their paycheck. The unions are unique have a unique privilege that no other private organization has, profit or nonprofit. The government collects its membership fees. No other private organization has that privilege, and it is a huge privilege. As far as colleges go, one interesting thing is Kutztown is part of the state system of higher education, as far as I know.
Yes.
As far there is a movement for the more profitable, mainly Westchester, to move out of it. I'm not sure whether Kutztown is profitable or not. And frankly, I think that there is a place for funding certain colleges. But each year, the General Assembly and the governor give $500 million to 5 favored universities. Kutztown is not one of them. 4 of those are billion-dollar private corporations. Private, tax-exempt, non-profit corporations get $500 million. Penn State getting the most of it with $250 million a year. Kutztown and the state system of higher education is subsidized by tax dollars. I don't know that there are substantial savings. I'm not sure. This is not one of them. The Kutztown is not one of the main drivers of the fiscal iceberg that's ahead, and the state system of higher education isn't. But it's interesting that the most profitable, meaning profit means that revenues exceed expenditures, it wants to get out. In other words, in academia, we're ready to share the wealth, but not ready to share our wealth. That's the problem. So if you're talking about sharing the wealth, and there's going to be a very clear distinction between me and the Democrats, who are very out front on tax and spend. This is what is baked into the Democratic cake, and somebody's going to say, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, the answer to that is really simple: somebody else. Well, I don't think so. I think that somebody else is you. I think the forgotten taxpayer is on the Titanic headed towards that fiscal iceberg. The Democrats are not going to slow us down or change course, and neither is Tom Corbett, who basically is Democrat light, or not even so much Democrat light. Ed Rendell never taxed Marcellus Shale. Ed Rendell never imposed a $2.4 billion tax increase. That's the highest tax increase in 22 years since Governor Casey's tax increase of 1991. This is the largest tax increase in 22 years, one of the biggest tax increases in the last 60 years, and it's done by a Republican and a Republican General Assembly. So defeating Tom Corbett in the primary is not only a defeat for Tom Corbett, but it's a defeat for Republican leadership that has disingenuously discredited itself with its false promises of limited government, lower taxes, and all the things that everybody thinks Republicans stand for, but in fact don't. The unions have their tentacles into the Republican Party very, very deeply, especially in the Southeast, in Bucks County and Delaware County, where in fact, I think all the entire delegation of Republican delegation, well, of course, the Democratic delegation as well, is funded by the unions. Well, the unions are the chief driver of growing government. They're the chief driver of the pensions. They're the chief driver of the fiscal iceberg. With the unions in control, there's no way that the forgotten taxpayer can avoid the fiscal iceberg. This is an election between the forgotten taxpayer and the unions. And the forgotten taxpayer and those elected officials that are doing the bidding or who are representing the unions and not the forgotten taxpayer. The forgotten taxpayer is the guy that pays for everything. And I don't think that everybody has quite realized what the impact of a fiscal iceberg is where on the forgotten taxpayer. Enough is enough. And maybe the other alternative, you just leave the state. I think a lot of people are doing that. But I don't think that that's feasible for a lot of people. And besides which, there's no reason why Pennsylvania can't be the Keystone State again, be a state where if we eliminate prevailing wage, we cut the cost of all government contracts by 10, 20, or even 30%, depending on how much the contract is labor. Prevailing wage is an artificial increase in the cost of government that the forgotten taxpayer has to pay. Well, everybody says, well, what about labor? What about this? Well, what about the forgotten taxpayer who has to pay for this? Prevailing wage, paycheck protection. If unions are so good, why do workers have to be forced to join a union? This is an element of coercion. There's such a good thing. Nobody forces you to come to Kutztown. You come to Kutztown because you want to, because there's a whole bunch of reasons why you want to be here, why it makes sense for you to be here. Nobody forces you to come here. Kutztown University can't force you to come here. but the unions can force you to join the union and to pay dues. And it's government force that makes workers join a union, even if they don't want to. This is a campaign between the taxpayer and the unions, a campaign to against the Republican leadership, those Republicans who pretend to be for the forgotten taxpayer but aren't. It's symbolized by Tom Corbett, who's broken his promises to those people who voted for him. I mean, who would vote for a person that broke his promises? I mean, this doesn't happen in business. It doesn't happen anywhere except in politics. And for some reason, Republican voters think that they have to vote for a guy who broke his promises to them. This seems to me not a right thing, and Republicans ought to have an alternative, and I'm that alternative.
So what are you doing to get your message out there? Obviously, you're going against the Republican machine, so to speak. So obviously, it can't be easy. You said you're working on a $5,000 to $10,000 budget compared to Corbett's,
$6 million, and the Democrat. Going back to the issue of Tom Corbett's vulnerability, there's 7 Democrats in the Democratic primary because they know Tom Corbett is very, very vulnerable. They know. And I'm sure they have done internal polling, and they know that how bad his numbers are. He's never released any poll. Tom Corbett has never released even an internal poll showing that he can beat any Democrat. So, as a practical matter, I have as much chance of winning in November as Tom Corbett. However, going to your question, it is going to be an unusual and different campaign. It's got to be something that goes viral. Every once in a while, you have something like that. Who knows? Some kid out there at Kutztown is listening to this thing and says, there's a point here. And, I am not going to work for the government. And, I'm going to be the forgotten taxpayer if I get a job. And one of the reasons I might not have a job is because the unions have them locked up or because the cost of doing business in Pennsylvania is prohibitive. So, maybe I ought to send out and do something viral. And who knows? It starts here. I don't know where it's going to start. I know who my voter is. It's the forgotten taxpayer. But I don't know who they are. And it's not going to be, and I'm going to reach them in an unconventional fashion. Somebody's going to be listening to a broadcast like this. Something's going to happen, and it's going to go viral. That's the way that this is going to get done. We have done the impossible before. We were involved. I was personally involved with defeating Robert Jubelier, who was the president pro tem, and Chip Bright bill. Scott Wagner in York, Pennsylvania, Senate District 28, defeated the Republican machine. That's the very Republican machine that's trying to do me in. And Scott Wagner spent quite a bit of money, but it was essential. He ran. This is astounding. This is history making. He ran in a special election, all of which was engineered by the Republican machine, Dominic Pileggi in particular. They engineered this special election because they figured that they would have their hand-picked hack, Ron Miller, run, and because it will be a low turnout, that they would win, and because they picked the candidate in the special election, that they would have the upper hand. Scott Wagner ran a write-in campaign and got 10,000 write-in votes. I don't think this has ever happened before. Certainly not in Pennsylvania. Wow. 10,000 write-in votes. The Ron Miller, the machine candidate, got 2,500, and the Democrat got 2,500. The Democrats were a little more energized than usual because they thought there might be an opportunity with the infighting with the Republicans. But Scott Wagner came in with 48% of the vote, and that 48% was all write-in. This is astounding. I mean, it is breathtaking to think that you could run a write-in campaign like that and win. And now, he was a known name and he'd done a lot of things, but a write-in campaign is very, very hard. And as I say, I don't know that it's ever worked in Pennsylvania, but it worked this time. So I'm thinking unexpected things happen. Sometimes the impossible happens, and we'll see what happens to happen. And I just have a feeling, and it's an instinct, and that my message goes viral, that people see the fiscal iceberg ahead. They see the contest between the unions and the forgotten taxpayer. They see the contest between the reform Republicans and the Republican machine. They see that the Republican message, my message of low taxes, limited government, and opportunity for everyone, low taxes for all, not just for some corporations, low taxes for everybody. Let people pursue their dreams, pursue their happiness in their own way, and not let the government take away whatever they earn. And let's see what happens, because certainly what's happening right now is driving us right towards a fiscal iceberg, and that is not going to be a pleasant sight when we're all in that cold, dark water.
Now, I saw something in the paper recently that I believe some of Corbett's people were actually challenging you
Correct.
to keep you off the ballot.
Correct.
Are you going to be on the ballot 100%?
I hope to. I mean, what I say is, with great wisdom, I will answer respectfully what I consider a meaningless question: what will happen? What will happen will happen. I expect that what will happen will happen. But we've looked at our petitions. I'm going to take a look at them. We're confident, or reasonably confident, that we can defeat the challenge. The fact that Corbett even challenged me shows that he's taking me seriously, shows that I'm a threat to him. And I haven't spent any money. I haven't done anything except talk on some of these radio shows. And I have a Facebook page, Bob Guzzardi Facebook, where I post most of my things. I have something called the Liberty Blog, which I post a lot of my comments and my analysis of state bills, sometimes federal, but I've been focusing mostly on state issues. I have something called the Liberty Index, where I analyze various bills, and I have my own webpage, bobguzzardi.com, and I have a guzzardiforgovernor.com, both of which the Bob Guzzardi site is biographical, gives some background on me. The Guzzardi for Governor site is not fully up to speed, but the Facebook has a lot of information, and you can go see what I talk about and see whether you like what I have to say. But it's going to be people talk about the social media campaign. Well, yeah, that's part of it, but it will really be a viral campaign. It'll be somebody will step up and say, and it just goes viral. And I don't see people speaking up. The Republicans will not speak up because anybody involved with the party who has any status at all is keeping his and her mouth shut because there's nothing in it for them. But we have a secret ballot, and that secret ballot is a very powerful thing. So we'll see if it goes viral. If it does, I get elected and I have the nomination, which will be huge. The Republican machine will be defeated. And this becomes the opportunity for change and reform in Pennsylvania, and hopefully make it a better place for people to do business and to grow old.
If you win in May and you go on to go up against whoever the Democratic winner is, can you win in November?
Well, my sort of disingenuous, smart alecky answer is I have as much chance of winning in November as Tom Corbett. I have said over and over and over again, I'm not going to take campaign contributions. However, there is no reason that various independent groups would be willing to spend money to support particular issues that I support. Paycheck protection, don't tax Marcellus Shale, vouchers for all for K through 12, expanding school choice. Those issues are something that might catch the imagination of some people, depending how well I do in the nomination. If I win the nomination, this is national. This is unprecedented. I mean, basically no money. It's all done because the voters are so sick of what's going on, and it's gotten out there and it says, maybe this is the day. So we'll see what happens. We'll see. I have my benchmark is 37%, which is how much Sam Rohrer got in his campaign 4 years ago. So I figure if I get anything close to 37%, that will be success. But I really think that this may well go viral. You never know. Talking to some kid at Kutztown University, it goes out there and it's picked up, and somebody says, this guy has something to tell us, and he is different. He's unusual. He's unconventional, and he may very well win. And besides, are we going to vote for somebody who's broke his promises to us? Are we going to vote for somebody who betrayed us? Are we going to vote for somebody who's for more taxes and more debt? I don't think so. I don't think it's to your interest, and I don't think it's the interest of the community to vote more, vote people into office who are going to increase debt, increase spending, increase taxes, whether they're a Republican or a Democrat.
One final question for you, sir. Of course, the big buzzword the past couple of years has been Tea Party Republicans. Do you consider yourself a Tea Party Republican?
No, I consider myself a reform Republican.
Okay.
I describe myself as a constitutional Republican, limited government, economic freedom, rule of law, separation of powers, 10th Amendment, meaning that Pennsylvania has responsibility for its own economic and political climate, and personal responsibility with biblical values.